friends, and welcome back to another video. So today I just thought I would do a massive book haul because I got a lot of books for my birthday, and some of these books are actually from January, February, and March, so from all 3 different months. Some of them I got shortly after the new year and my new year book haul, and one of them I just got yesterday, so I thought that it would be a good idea to show you all the books that I've gotten recently. And there's probably like 50 books in this book haul. It's a lot of books, so I will divide it into different sections based on genre, so you can skip to whatever sections you feel like watching. Alright, so without further ado, I'm gonna start with 2 middle grade novels that I have. So the first one is The Lost Library by Rebecca Steed and Wendy Mass. This is the first book, and this is about a mysterious little free library in a small town called Martinville, and this 11-year-old ends up finding these 2 old books in it, and they start asking questions about a long ago event that happened in this town. So basically there's like this ghost, and it involves these little free libraries, and I thought that was super fun. I love little free libraries myself, so I thought it was super cool that there is this concept of little free libraries kind of prevalent in this story. And I actually won this in a Goodreads giveaway, which is super exciting because I've only ever won a couple of these, but I think I got this one maybe in late February, early March. I'm super excited to dive in. It looks like a very short read, and I think it'll be really fun. I love that it has a cat on the cover and the little free library aspect, and I can't wait to get into this one. All right, and the other middle grade book that I've hauled is The Wish Switch. So this one is about basically this magical wishing well, and these 2 kids kind of find it and they start making a bunch of wishes, and then their wishes start coming true. So it's basically about the consequences of what if everything you wish for actually happened. So I think it'll be really interesting to dive into. This one was sent to me by the publisher, and it's coming out in May of 2025, so I can't wait to dive into this one. But it sounds super interesting. It's a middle grade novel that I think will be a coming of age story, and I love that it's teaching younger audiences basically to be careful for what you wish for, because you never know what might come true, and I think that's a very important lesson for children to learn about. So I think this will be a really fun one to dive into. All right, so the next section of this book haul that I'm going to do is my dystopian and sci-fi section. I only have a few books in this section as well, so I thought that it would be great to do next, and I have 3 books to share with you. All right, so the first one is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I actually found this one in a little free library, and it's basically about this AI person named Annie, and she's created to be the perfect girlfriend for this guy named Doug, but it's basically kind of trying to figure out if she is really what he's looking for, if AI can ever really imitate the real feelings of a human, and just kind of managing those expectations. I love that this one is focused on the theme of AI. I haven't read too many AI books, so I can't wait to dive into this one, and I was super excited when I found that this was in my little free library, so I'm excited to dive into this one. The next book I have to share is also an advanced reader copy. It comes out on May 1st, it says, and it's Palm Meridian by Grace Flahive, and this is basically set in a dystopian future. So it's set in 2067, and Florida is partially submerged underwater, and it's about these women that live in basically like a nursing home, and they're a lot older. So one of the women is deciding to end her life, and she's doing this because she received a cancer diagnosis, and her friends are deciding to have like an end of life party. But it's really interesting. It goes into some of the secrets and things about her past, and I think it'll be interesting to see how Grace has kind of manifested this dystopian world and to see how it ends up playing out. I really like the concept and the premise of this, so I hope it's one that I absolutely love. All right, and then the last book in this section is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Now, if you don't know, this is the newest Hunger Games novel. It is a prequel, so it is following the second quarter quell, or the 50th Hunger Games, and these are the games that Haymitch won. So Haymitch is Katniss's mentor in the original Hunger Games trilogy. So it's basically following these games and kind of the aftermath and how that all plays out. So I'm excited to dive into this one. I've seen everybody and talking about this right now because it is mid-March. It has just come out on Wednesday, and I'm filming this on a Friday. So I know everybody is just starting to read this, and people are having a lot of reactions to this. A lot of people have been crying, so I can't wait to dive into this. This might be my next read. I don't know for sure, but I definitely would like it to be, because I can't wait to see what the fuss is all about, and I don't want to be spoiled. world, but I'm super excited to have this one. All right, so my next section is actually going to be 2 sections in one. So this is going to be my nonfictions and my classics. I only have a few classics and I have a few nonfictions, so it felt right putting them together. I think there's a couple of memoirs in here, but I'll dive right in. All right, so the first book I want to share is Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden, and I also found this one in a little free library near me, and it's basically about this world where appearances are important and a girl's virginity is basically auctioned off to the highest bidder. And so women are trained to be subservient in this world, and I've heard a lot of mixed things about this one, but I am interested in trying it out. I know there's been a film that has been made based off of this book, and I know that there are some better written works on this topic, but I found this one in a little free library and decided that I wanted to read it myself. The next book I have to talk about is I Heard Her Call My Name by Lucy Sante. So this is a memoir, and it is about this woman who ends up leaving her home in Belgium and she moves to the United States. And in the midst of the AIDS epidemic and people dying young from drugs and all of that, she's kind of coming to terms with her gender dysphoria. So it is a little bit about her journey with her gender identity and becoming a transgender woman. So I think it'll be really interesting and a very poignant read. I'm definitely trying to read some more books by transgender people and some more just LGBTQ plus books just in general, but I think this will be one that will really stick with me, and I can't wait to dive into this one. The next book I have is a collection of poetry, and it's Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Now I know a lot of people have already read this, and I just wanted to see what it was about because a lot of people really love this book, so I can't wait to dive into this. But it is, she says, a journey of surviving through poetry of 21 years, and I think it'll have a lot of interesting different poems in it on different topics. I don't read poetry a ton, but I do pick it up from time to time. So I think that this is one that I probably won't read in one go, but I'll read many different times. So I'll read a poem here, a poem there. And it is one that I found in a little free library, so I absolutely had to pick it up when I saw it and had the chance. And I can't wait to dive into this. The next one I have to talk about is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this is about an orphan who finds herself living in her uncle's gloomy old manor. And basically she's hearing all these weird sounds at night and she doesn't know what's going on. This is a classic that I've heard a lot about and I want to really dive into it and read it. I have another of Frances Hodgson Burnett's books down in my classic shelves down here, and that's where this book will go after I'm done with this video. But I can't wait to dive into this one and dive into some more classics. It sounds really interesting and it sounds a little bit like a thriller kind of vibe, which is pretty different from the classics that I usually read. So I hope that I really like this one, and I really like that it's about the house, and I hope that the house will have like a big presence within the book itself. The next book I have to share is also a classic, and it's Aladdin and the Arabian Nights. This is the Barnes & Noble special edition, and I actually got this book for my birthday specifically, and the back says Open Sesame, but it's a really stunning book. I'll show you some of the end pages. This is what it looks like in here. It has some illustrations on the inside, so I'll try to show you one of those. Yeah, it has illustrations like this all inside, and I'm really excited to dive into this. I want to read where these stories originated from, because the only version of Aladdin that I've ever read about or seen about is the Disney movies, and I know that those aren't really accurate, so I want to dive into the original source stories. The next book is also a classic, and it is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and this one is following this very bright, very industrious and ambitious girl named Esther, and she's kind of grappling with all these expectations that have been placed on her by society. So it's expectations of what her gender role should be, of the fact that she should be married, what she should do with her career, and basically it follows her journey with her mental health as it deteriorates, and she is trying to find a way to reintegrate herself into daily life, and she also undergoes electroconvulsive therapy. So electric shock therapy is featured in this book. I think it is a really poignant read that will stick with me for a very long time. It is one that I think a lot of people should read, and I think it's important because we need to be advocating for mental health and proper mental health treatment, not just shock people if they aren't feeling well. So I think it'll be one that will really stand out to me. I'm a very big mental health advocate, so it's one that I definitely wanted to read, and when I saw this one in my little free library near me, I knew I had to pick it up because I think it's one that will stick with me for a long time. All right, the next book I have is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is another modern classic, and this one is about this boy who ends up becoming involved in a gang of like rich kids. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of read about. It's one that has been printed and read over and over again. It's been over 50 years that it's been out, and I don't know too much more about it outside of that, but I can't wait to dive into this one. I think it'll be interesting to understand the perspective, especially because I don't read a lot of stories about gangs or even stories about gangs involving rich kids, so I think it'll give me a new perspective on that. The next book I have is a memoir called Firstborn by Lauren Christensen, and this one is basically about this woman who finds out that she she's pregnant and she ends up having a miscarriage. And it's a lot of her grappling with the after effects of that miscarriage and kind of thinking about what happened to that child and what happens to us when everyone we know has gone. So it's kind of grappling with that, with our mortality, with what happens to a child when it is not born alive. And I think it's a really interesting one to delve into. I will say it's probably going to be a very difficult book to read for anyone that has ever suffered a miscarriage, but I think it will be a powerful read and something that will stick with me for a long time. I know that it's a story of grief and loss, and I know that it'll probably hit me really hard, so I have to be in the right headspace to read this, but I think it'll be a good one to read. All right, and the final book I have for this section is Transcendent Kingdom by Yajiasi, and this is about this girl named Gifty who is a 6-year neuroscience PhD student, so she's almost done with her PhD, and she is dealing with some family issues. So her brother has an ankle injury when he's playing a sport, and he ends up overdosing on OxyContin, and then her mother, I believe, is suicidal in this book, so she's dealing with that as well. And it's a story of trying to figure out how to deal with these things through science, but also she wants to find answers within her own faith, and I think it's a little bit of her grappling with those two ideas. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, and I can't wait to dive into it. All right, so the next section of books that I want to talk about is actually mysteries and thrillers. So all these books kind of fit in that general vicinity of the genre. I don't know exactly always if they're a mystery or a thriller, so apologies for that, but they will all be fitting in that genre. All right, so the first book I have to talk about is Poison by Susan Fromberg Schaefer, and it's basically this story of this man has died, and his third wife and his children and all of his like family members and friends are kind of trying to figure out things about his life. They're trying to tell his story, and they have to deal with a lot of chaotic emotions and memories as they're seeking to find things in his papers that he left behind for their own purposes. They want to write a biography, I think, and it is a story that focuses on jealousy and loss and kind of understanding all of the things that happened within this man's orbit and kind of how he brought them all together with his charisma and everything like that. So it sounds really interesting. I don't know how this will play out exactly, but I think it'll be an interesting one to read about. I like books that deal with the concept of death, especially books that deal with people that have already died and or are on the verge of death and kind of grappling with that. So I think it'll be one that I really enjoy. All right, the next book I have to talk about is A World of Curiosities by Louise Penny. I found this one in a little free library near me as well, and it's basically about this community called Three Pines that is kind of re-emerging after a harsh winter. They're all coming together, they're having a special celebration. These people are investigating other people's lives, and a man and woman have reappeared that have been missing, and these children were kind of left behind when their mother was murdered, but they've arrived in this village and it's kind of trying to figure out what they're doing there. So these two people have to kind of go into unlocking all the details of this very tragic circumstances in this case, trying to figure out if the mother's murderer ended up hurting these children and what happened to them if they're suffering from PTSD. So I think it'll be really interesting to dive into. I kind of want to read more stories about communities coming together, and it'll be interesting to see how these two children are coping with having dealt with that PTSD from their mother's murderer. All right, the next book that I have to talk about is Girl in the Creek by Wendy and Wagner, and this book is about this girl's brother named Aaron. So her brother's been missing for 5 years, and it's basically like he walked into the Pacific Northwest Mountains or the forest there and he's gone. So she's trying to figure out where he went. She's traveling where he was last seen, and he wasn't the first hiker to go missing in the area. So she has found the corpse of this woman in this area, and she is trying to figure out what happened to him and is trying to uncover the secrets of this forest. This is another thriller that sounds really interesting. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's definitely one that I want to try to figure out, and it's described as being a pulse-pounding eco-horror about climate change. So that's really interesting. I like books that are focused on climate change or focused on social issues that are really applicable to the current day. So hopefully it's one that I will really enjoy. Now the next one, I didn't really know whether to include it with this stack or with my romances because it's like a rom-com murder mystery, and that is Alice Chen's Reality Check. This is also an advanced reader copy. This book has not come out yet, and it's written by Carol Liu and Jennifer Young. But it's basically about this girl who doesn't believe in true love, and she's in a lot of debt. Her mom has a lot of very expensive medical bills and all of that, and she's trying to get onto a reality TV show, and she wants to go like sip cocktails on the beach, whatever. She wants to win money, but her fiance cheats on her with another contestant of the show, and she kind of ends up meeting this new guy named Daniel, and they kind of come together because someone is killing people in the reality show, and they want to figure out who it is. is. So they kind of fall in love in the midst of doing that. So it sounds really interesting. I don't think that I've heard of too many books that are a combination of both rom-com and murder mystery. So I'll be interested to see how I like that, especially because I love romance, but I'm not a big thriller person. So hopefully just a blend of it will be something that I will really enjoy and will make the thriller aspects more appealing to me. The next book I got was from the publisher, and it is Wake the Wild Creatures by Nova Ransuma. And it sounds like this girl has kind of been taken from her home in the mountains. She lives in a community with women, but these men came to kind of infiltrate that community, and she's taken from there, and she's forced to live with a family she doesn't know, and is trying to fit into a world that has a lot of misogyny, capitalism, and is really disconnected from nature, and that's very opposite to what she grew up with. So I think it'll be really interesting to dive into, and I know that there's some like magical aspects to this, but I don't know, this felt a little bit more mystery thriller to me. Maybe it's more fantasy, I don't know exactly, but it sounds like one that I will really enjoy diving into. So the next book I found in a little free library, and it is The Paris Library by Lucy Foley, and it sounds like it's a murder mystery, and they kind of have to figure out which person in Paris ended up killing this resident. So it's saying it could be the socialite, the nice guy, the alcoholic, the girl on the verge, or the concierge. Everyone's a neighbor and everyone's a suspect, and everyone has something they're not telling. So it sounds just like a classic thriller, and I think it'll be one that I will hopefully enjoy. I don't usually read thrillers, but I want to get more into the genre, and I've heard really good things about Lucy Foley's writing. The next book I found in a little free library, and it is Red Queen by Juan Gomez Jurado. This is translated to English, and I found this one in a little free library. It sounds really interesting. It's about this woman named Antonia who has solved a bunch of crimes and mysteries, but she's not a detective, she's not an investigator, nothing like that, and she has solved a bunch of crimes, and she has left Madrid, but that's where she's from, and she doesn't really see anyone, but people are looking for her because she solved all these crimes. So it sounds really interesting. I hope that I really enjoy this one, and I would maybe like to read more of this author's works if I like this one and read them in the original Spanish, but I can't wait to dive into it and see what I think of this one. The next book I got is Don't Let Him In by Lisa Jewell. This is an advanced reader copy, and it's basically saying that this woman has the perfect man. He seems ideal, he loves her, he's great, he's amazing, he's perfect. And you know what that means in a thriller. He has some shady things going on. He disappears for days at a time. He doesn't tell her where he's going, who he's with, anything like that. And then she realizes, wait, maybe I shouldn't let him back in because I don't know what's going on here. So I don't know anything else about the story other than that. I can't wait to dive into this one. I think it'll be really interesting to see what's going on. And I always think that these wife and husband kind of mysteries and thrillers are really interesting to dive into because there's so much nuance going on behind each of the characters. So I can't wait to dive into it. The next book I have was very kindly sent to me by the publisher, and it's called Up in Smoke by Nick Brooks. And this is a thriller. It says that after Cooper King, he's pressured by his big brother figure to go basically loot some stores and stuff. He ends up in this like shooting, and someone dies, and he ends up fleeing, but the news ends up showing him on screen. So he's afraid that the cops will come looking for him, and a suspect is taken into custody who was also with him. So it's very much about kind of trying to clear this person's name and trying to deal with this whole situation with the investigation. And it's about this deception of Cooper is hiding the fact that he was there when the guns were shooting. So that's really interesting. It's this guy who is possibly going to be locked up for a crime he didn't commit, but Cooper doesn't want to go down for the crime. So I think it'll be interesting. I know so many cases where the wrong person is arrested for a crime, and I don't know how this is going to go down, but it'll be a really interesting one to see how it all plays out. All right, the next book I have, I also found in a little free library, and it's called The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. This is the first book in the Chaos Walking series, and it's basically about this town where everyone can hear everyone else's thoughts, so you don't have any privacy whatsoever. This is a very scary thought to me, and is giving me a little bit of like 1984 vibes by George Orwell. So I'm a little creeped out by this premise, but I think it'll be interesting. And it says, how do you escape when your pursuers can hear your every thought? So there's a very dangerous secret trying to be kept hidden in this, and I can't wait to dive into this. I know some people have read this and really liked it, so hopefully it'll be a thriller that I can really get into. All right, so the next book that I have to talk about is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. So it's basically saying that this very popular high school senior named Andy was killed by her boyfriend, and he then died by suicide, and it was very talked about in their town, and Pip is now trying to understand things about this case. So she is not sure that the original investigation was done correctly. So she wants to find out what happened, and she's finding all these dark secrets, which maybe proves that Sal, the girl's boyfriend, was innocent and didn't end up killing this girl like we all thought. So maybe there's someone else that's out there that's the murderer. All right, so the next genre I want to talk about is historical fiction. So I have a whole separate section for historical romance, but these are just regular historical fictions. So the first book that I want to talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it's about this girl who is named Daisy, and she's coming up in the late 60s, and she dreams of basically being a rock star, being a singer, and being noticed. And she ends up joining this band called The Six, and it's led by this brooding person named Billy, and it's all about their kind of journey with this band together. And I think there is a little bit of a romance between Daisy and Billy in this story, but I think it's really interesting to see what will happen in this book. I think it's told from the perspective after the band has disbanded, so it'll be really interesting to see how they all come together, why they split apart, and to understand more about the relationship between Daisy and Billy. I know there is an adaptation of this on Prime Video, so I definitely would like to read this before diving into that. The next book I got in a little free library recently, and it is Codename Verity. So this is set in World War II in 1943 Nazi-occupied France, and it's basically about this pilot and passenger who are best friends, but only one of the girls can survive. Basically, the other girl is arrested by the Gestapo, so that is the Nazi police, and she's given a choice to either reveal her mission or die, and they want to get the truth out of her, but it's not exactly what they expect it to be. So this sounds really interesting. I like World War II historical fiction. I think it is a genre that is very overwritten sometimes though, but hopefully this will be one that I like because I do like to read this genre from time to time, and it is a little bit different because they're trying to get information out of her. I feel like most of the stories that I've read of World War II are either kind of more of the battles and stuff happening or the concentration camps in Nazi-occupied Germany, but I think this will be a really good read to dive into. Next book I want to talk about is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. So it's basically these two people that come to Alaska because they've dealt with some other things in their life and they're trying to get away from it. One of them has come back from the Vietnam War and served there, and they're kind of trying to adapt and live in Alaska. It seems like it is an answer to all their prayers because they want to be in a place where they feel like they belong, but with the winter approaching and all of that, they find that they are covered in a bunch of snow and their mental state is kind of deteriorating. So I think this will be a really interesting one. I, to be honest, just want to read everything that Kristen Hanna has ever written because I adore her writing. I've read so far Firefly Lane and The Four Winds by her, and wow, both of those packed a punch. I will say I think I liked The Four Winds maybe a little bit more than Firefly Lane because it was just a different kind of historical fiction. Firefly Lane is a little more modern, but I'm interested to see how this one will play out. And I guess Kristen Hanna likes to write a little bit about Vietnam War because The Women is also about the Vietnamese War. The next book that I have to talk about is Husbands and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. It basically sets place in two different timelines, but I wanted to kind of put this with historicals because I didn't know where else it would fit. But one of the timelines takes place in 2022 and one of them takes place in 1952, I believe it is. So one of them is post World War II and one of them is basically present time, and they're kind of connected because they have this like secret family heirloom that they both find, and the woman in the present timeline has lost her son, so she's kind of coping with that, and I think that'll be really interesting to see how their stories interconnect in this one. So hopefully I'll like this. I've seen some mixed reviews on this though, so I'm not sure how I'll feel on it. Alright, so that was it for the historical fictions that I wanted to talk about. So the next genre that I want to dive into is fantasy. So the first book that I wanted to share is Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Last Hours trilogy, so I can't really dive into a lot of the details for this one because it is a sequel. I found this one in a little free library, if you'll believe it. It is a collector's first edition, but I thought it was really cool that I found it in there, and I definitely wanted to make sure it got into the right hands on people who really want it, so I picked it up. But it is following the same band of characters that we were following in the first book. So we have Cordelia, James, Lucy, and the whole gang of merry thieves in this, and it is set in the Shadowhunter world, so it is this world where people are half people, half angel, and they have the ability to fight demons. This is set in London in 1903, and that's all I want to say about this book, but I love this trilogy so much. They were in my favorite books of 2024, and if you haven't read any of the Shadowhunter Chronicles books books. I recommend reading them, and I recommend starting with the Infernal Devices trilogy because that's my favorite personally. The next book I have is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I got these, I think, as a set, so I got all 3 of the Mistborn trilogy, or the first part of the Mistborn trilogy. It is my goal this year to start reading some of Brandon Sanderson's works, so hopefully I'll get into them. And it's basically about this hero who tried to save the world and failed, and it's about trying to form an uprising against this Dark Lord ruler that they have, with this like band of a criminal mastermind and an unlikely heroine who is a street urchin. So I can't wait to dive into this. I don't know too much more about this book, but I want to dive into this one. The next book I have is The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn trilogy. So it's basically kind of following up on the events of Mistborn. I don't really know what is happening in this one, but I think there is a new society being formed after this empire has kind of been collapsed. So I think it'll be really interesting to dive into this one and see what it's about. I just am so excited to dive into this series. I know so many people have absolutely loved it, and I think I was most recently recommended this by Abby Books, so I'll link her down below, but I can't wait to dive into this series. And then I have the last book in the Mistborn trilogy, and that is The Hero of Ages. So this is book 3. This is the last book in this trilogy, but I think there is a second trilogy in the Mistborn saga. This is all part of the Cosmere Universe, and it sounds really interesting. It sounds like the world has kind of come to a head once again, and there is a possible destruction of everything that could happen in this book. Again, I don't really know what's happening in this one because I haven't read the first one yet, but I can't wait to dive into this series. The next book that I have to talk about is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 10th anniversary edition, and it has apparently 10,000 words of bonus content, but I just know that this is a standalone, which is really unique for the fantasy genre, and it is also part of the Cosmere Universe, so I do want to read this one, and I'm just really interested by the premise. It says that there was a city of gods and a place of power, radiance, and magic, and yet this place that is magnificent, like Elantris had once been, and its inhabitants had been that way, it doesn't really exist that way anymore. So it sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to dive into this one. I want to see why this place doesn't exist anymore, what happened to the people there, and why they just live like a mundane existence now, where Elantris had once been this great paradise. So I'm interested to dive into this one. I am so excited to have it, and I just think it'll be one that I will really enjoy, or hopefully it will be. It'll be part of my journey diving into the Cosmere Universe anyway. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is The White Dragon by Anne McCaffrey. So it says basically that there's never been this bond that has been as close as the one that the daring Lord Jacksom and his extraordinary white dragon have. So it is a dragon fantasy book, and I know this one was written in the 70s, and I think it's one of the earliest dragon fantasy books, so that was part of the reason why I picked it up. I found this in a little free library near me, so I knew I had to grab it, and I think it'll be interesting to see just this bond between this dragon rider and the dragon, and kind of how they deal with disaster and different situations. So hopefully I'll enjoy this, but I got it simply for the fact that it is one of the earliest dragon books to ever exist, and it is a classic dragon book. The next book I have is a book in a series that I have a few books from, and it is Part of Your World by Liz Braswell. So this is a twisted tale, and it basically says, what if Ariel had never defeated Ursula? So my understanding is all these stories are twisted tale versions of the Disney originals, and it's kind of where the villain succeeds instead of the heroes. So I'm really interested in seeing that. I really like stories that have very interesting villains, and I think that it'll be interesting to learn more about Ursula's backstory, what happens when she comes into power, and how that all plays out. I want to know more of her backstory, and I think that we'll get more of that in this one, so I can't wait to dive into it. The next book I have is Once Upon a Dream by Liz Braswell, and this is also a twisted tale, and it says, what if the Sleeping Beauty never woke up? So it's basically about this idea that it should be simple, where this is what the story that we know, but what if she never woke up and the prince is eager to like wake her up and all of that, but she has to escape from a different castle of thorns. So the prince is trying to help her, and their old friends are trying to help her, but Maleficent's people are following Aurora everywhere she goes. So I think it'll be interesting. It sounds like a story of identity, because it says that she's going to figure out who she truly is, and her time is running out. So I'm interested in all these twisted tales because I like that it's a twist on what actually happens in the movies that we've grown up with. So I think this would be an interesting one to dive into. And the last book I have in this series is A Whole New World by Liz Braswell, and it's What If Aladdin Had Never Found the Lamp, which I think that's really interesting, and especially because I have Aladdin, or the original story of Aladdin, in my book haul as well. This is really fitting to have this. So it's basically where he he's just another street rat. He never finds the lamp, and Jasmine is still trying to escape her fate as a princess, but Jafar becomes all-powerful and he finds the lamp, and he tries to break the laws of magic and have control over love and death. So Aladdin and Jasmine end up having to try to unite the people of Agrabah, and I think it'll be really interesting because Aladdin doesn't have all the power of the lamp, but Jafar does. So it'll be curious to see how they're able to work together to stop him. So I'm interested in diving into this one, and I can't wait to read it. The next book I have to share is Air by Sabaa Tahir, and this is what it looks like. I got this from Barnes & Noble as a pre-order, and it's basically about this orphan, this outcast, and this prince, and a killer who is trying to bring the empire to its knees. So I'm assuming that it's kind of a high story where they have to come together, and this orphan has seen a bunch of suffering in her life. She is fueled by vengeance, and she wants to do all this stuff for the love of her people, but she makes a mistake and she ends up in prison. Also follows a tracker who uses her magic to trace her marks, and she is destitute, so she agrees to hunt down a killer who's murdered kids across this empire, but she has to carry out the job and get paid. But this leads to an unexpected encounter that might cost her more than she's willing to give up. And it follows Will, who is the crown prince of the empire. He doesn't want to take the throne, he doesn't believe in it, and he is the son of a reviled emperor, so he understands that power can corrupt, but he is trying to figure out if he can be the ruler that his people really need. And I think it'll be interesting to see how these three stories kind of interweave in this one. I have read All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. I just finished that one in March, so I can't wait to read more of her books. I think I need to read An Ember in the Ashes and that whole trilogy before diving into this one, but I definitely want to read this one soon. The next book that I have to talk about is Ferris by Gail Carson Levine. She is the author of Ella Enchanted, and I saw the movie for Ella Enchanted when I was a child. This sounded interesting because it is about this like magical mirror. So this fairy ends up giving a dreadful gift once again. So it's Lucinda, and the gift is this magical mirror. This girl named Ozza never looks into it if she can help it, but she tries to keep out of sight of it. But she is in a land of singers and all of that, so her voice captivates a very prominent prince in this land. So it sounds really interesting, and I am just curious to see how it'll all play out. I think it's a little bit of like a Snow White retelling, maybe, because it is called Fairest after all. But I can't wait to dive into this one and see how it all plays out. I really loved Ella Enchanted growing up, so hopefully I'll like this book. The next book I have is East by Edith Peto. I know this book has been out for a while and it has a sequel and everything, but it is about this girl who has always longed for adventure. Her name is Rose, and a white bear kind of appears and makes her a mysterious offer, and she accepts. So in exchange for health and prosperity for her family, she agrees to live with the white bear in a castle, and she's trying to settle into a new life, and she is trying to make a dangerous choice to go back to her family. So I think it'll be really interesting. It says it's a sweeping romantic epic as timeless as any fairy tale, so it sounds a little bit like a Beauty and the Beast retelling but with a white bear. So I'm curious to read this one and see how I like it. I don't know if I'll get to this one soon, but it's definitely one that I would like to try. Alright, so that was it for my fantasy books. The next section that I want to go into is contemporary books. So these are contemporary romances, all of them, and I want to start with Bachelor on the Prowl by Casey Michaels. And it's basically about this woman who's overseeing her company's first wedding fashion show and is in a panic. So she accidentally also assumes that this very hot looking executive is a missing male model, and that puts her in a tough situation because she pulls down his pants and tosses him on the runway. And he was just coming to visit, but he got this interaction with Holly, and he is suddenly proposing to her the next day, and it's crazy. It sounds like this story just happens super fast paced. Holly doesn't trust this man at all, and it goes from there. So it is a Christmas holiday romance, and I can't wait to read this around Christmas time. So this will probably be one of the books that I look to pick up in the Christmas season this year. It is a short novel, so I think it'll be one that I will definitely dive into then. The next book I have to talk about is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I ended up finding this one in a little free library near me, and it's basically about this woman who is a ghostwriter for very prolific romance authors in the industry, but after a breakup she doesn't believe in love anymore, so she has a problem, and she has a new editor who won't give her an extension for her book deadline, and she wants to basically figure out what to do to revive her career, but she's prepared to just end her career because she doesn't know what to do. And she has to return home to help her family bury her father, and she has been on the run from her town for 10 years that really never understood her. So she misses the sounds of her southern nights outside, and she misses her family, but she can't bring herself to stay. So it sounds really interesting. She finds a ghost at the funeral parlor traveler's front door, and he's very handsome as ever, and she's confused why he's there. So she thinks romance is dead, but so is her new editor, so that's crazy. And his unfinished business will have her second guessing everything she knows about love stories. So it sounds like it's gonna be the romance of this woman with this ghost possibly. So that sounds really interesting. It sounds like a different premise for a romance, and I think that's crazy that she knows him as her editor and now he's dead. So I can't wait to dive into this one. I've heard really good things about Ashley Poston's writing, so I definitely want to read this sooner rather than later. The next book I have is The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. I hope I said her last name right. I don't think I did, but it is about this couple named Claire and Henry who met when Claire is 6 and Henry is 36, but also when Claire is 22 and Henry is 30. And this is because Henry suffers from a rare condition where he can basically travel through time because his genetic clock resets every so often. And so he's himself pulled into the past, into the future all the time. And it's kind of a force that they can't really control. So it's about the struggle to try to lead a normal life when this man is a time traveler and he can't control it. I've seen the movie for this and I've seen the TV series that HBO Max made, and I just want to read this book. I got this in a lot with a bunch of other romances, so I'm excited to dive into this one and see what it's all about, what the original story is like, and see how well the adaptations did. The next book I have to talk about was actually a February release, and it is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. And this book was really kind of making the rounds on all the social media in February. The talk has kind of died down a little bit, but I can't wait to dive into this one. It is about Aiden, who has a romance hotline. So he's got this like radio show or this podcast, and he has a secret, and that is that he doesn't believe in love anymore. But he gets this call from a young girl who's basically trying to help her mother get a date. And Lucy thought that she was doing fine, but then all of Baltimore is scrutinizing her love life or lack thereof. So it is kind of about their relationship, and it starts from there. I think that's a really interesting premise. I know some people have had mixed feelings on this, so hopefully I'll love this, but I've heard great things about B.K. Borison's books, and I think this will be a fun romance. The next book that I have to talk about is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and it's about this girl named Emma who believes that she's cursed because all of her boyfriends basically find their true love with the person after they break up with her, so it's their next relationship. And this guy is known as being love's good luck charm, and he's gone viral for that. So they decide they want to try dating each other because maybe it'll cancel each other out, the curses. But then they have to deal with a lot of personal family issues. Emma's mother shows up on the scene, and Justin has to assume guardianship for his 3 siblings. So they have to deal with a lot of real feelings and a lot of real situations. So it ends up becoming more than they thought it would be. This sounds really cute. It sounds like it'll be a really fun romance to dive into. I've heard great things about Abby Jimenez's writing, so I can't wait to dive in. And I didn't realize this was a part of the series when I first got it, but now it is my quest to collect all the books in the series so I can have them all together. The next book that I have to share I found in a little free library as well, and it is Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. So it's about this woman named Hallie, and she falls in love with this guy at the age of 14. They almost kiss, and that's it. That's all their connection as teenagers. Now he's returned to their small town as adults, and she's kind of revamping these gardens on this estate, and she wonders if she'll finally get to kiss him. But he is a professor, and he's grumpy now, and he isn't like the person that she remembered from the past. So their personalities are clashing, so it sounds like it could be an enemies to lovers romance. And she has this wine-fueled girls' night and feels like she did something reckless and remembers that she left a letter for her crush. And he's trying to write a novel, but he is distracted by Hallie. She is eccentric and chronically late. So then he finds this letter sent by a woman from his past, and he wonders who this admirer is and is coming more into her orbit. So it sounds like it'll be really interesting. He sounds like a grumpy person. She sounds like a very sunshiny person. So it could be a grumpy sunshine romance, which I love that trope. And it sounds a little bit like enemies to lovers as well. So I can't wait to dive into this one. The next book that I have to share was also sent to me by the publisher, and it is Jilted by Vi Keeland. And it says From Ditched by the Groom to Kissed by the Groomsman. So it sounds super cute. It sounds like it's gonna be a romance between this woman and the groomsman after she's been ditched by the groom. So she was the bride. And I think that it makes for an interesting premise to this one. It says that it's a slow burn, swoony romance, and it's 27 Dresses meets The Hating Game. I loved 27 Dresses growing up, and I haven't read The Hating Game, but I did watch the movie and I enjoyed it quite a lot. So I expect that I'll really like this one. The next book I have to share is All the Men I've Loved Again by Christine Pride. This is an advanced reader copy. It comes out on June 1st, maybe? I don't know exactly. The cover doesn't really say, but it's set in 1999, and it's about this girl who is going to college. She goes to all white prep school in a white suburb, suburb, and she comes to this college, which is a lot of people with dark skin, so it's a surprise for her, and she thinks she's kind of figuring everything out, but there's a lot of secrets and surprises in store for her. She has really strong feelings for this guy named Aaron, who is a photographer that understands her in a way that no one else ever has, and she feels her heart being pulled in two directions. And then it also follows her 20 years later, all grown up, and it's kind of about her trying to avoid serious relationships, but now she is in an unexpected reconnection with someone from her past, and she's agonizing over how to deal with two men, and it's gonna test everything she knew about herself. So I think it'll be interesting. It sounds like a coming of age story, but it is also about past love, so that's why I grouped it here, and I can't wait to dive into this one. It sounds like a really fun story, and I like that it's dual timeline. I tend to like books that are written in multiple timelines, so hopefully I'll love this one. And it says that it's about a woman grappling with fate and romantic destiny, so I think that's really interesting to see how it'll play out. All right, and the last contemporary romance I have to talk about is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. So this is about this wild bet that this girl Alexis Montgomery has with a guy named Daniel Grant, and he is a hot carpenter who is 10 years younger than her, and they're complete opposites. Alexis is like this city girl, Daniel is like this country guy, and basically it's about their romance. She has very rich parents. She just wants to be a doctor though, and he lives in a very tight-knit community, so it's very city, country, suburb vibes, and they are looking for something short-term, but they don't realize that they're going to develop feelings for each other, so they're looking just for a short-term fling. But yeah, the reason why it's Part of Your World is because he is a country dude and she is a city gal with very rich parents. This is a tale as old as time, but I can't wait to dive into this one. Like I said, I've heard great things about Abby Jimenez's writing, and I believe it's in the same series as Just for the Summer, so I can't wait to dive into it. All right, so the next section of books that I have to talk about is the largest one, and this is historical romances. So I'm just gonna dive into this one because I have so many of these books to talk about. As I'm looking at it now, I have like 3 stacks of books to dive into, so I'm gonna dive in. So the first one I have is Christie by Catherine Marshall. It's set in 1912, and it's about Christie leaving her home to teach school in Smoky Mountains. So she's a teacher, and she comes to know people with love and resilience there, and learns about their poverty, and it's about her faith being tested by this, and kind of trying to meet the needs and find strength from 2 young men. So I don't know who she will end up with, but it sounds like it could be a love triangle in this one. I got this in a massive lot from eBay, so I don't know if I'll read this one. I don't know if I will donate it, but it is one that I recently got in that lot. The next one I have is If He's Deering by Hannah Howell. It says that it's a dazzling new novel in the Warlock family saga, so it sounds like it's part of a series, so I'll probably have to go through and read the other books in order, because you don't always have to read historical romance series in order, but I just personally prefer to. But it says that a stranger's carriage is being stolen by Lady Katrin Griffin, and it's the most reckless thing she's ever done. She has this very powerful attraction to the carriage's owner, and she has heard that this guy has basically these otherworldly gifts, so he has special powers, and he's the one person who can keep her son and his inheritance safe from her late husband's ruthless brother. So it's trying to protect herself, but she doesn't know how to do that, and she thinks it might be too late. So it is a romance based off of convenience and also to try to protect her son. And Orion, the hero in this book, he is from the worst kind of ilk that people can find. Women walk away from him. He finds that Katrin is a mix of innocence and sensuality, and he's really attracted to her, but he thinks that people need to stay away from him. So I think it'll be really interesting to dive into this one. I hope that I will like this, and hopefully I'll pick this one sooner rather than later, but who knows? I have so many books to read. The next book that I have to talk about is a holiday romance with stories from Sabrina Jeffries, Karen Hawkins, Candace Camp, and Meredith Duran, and it says What Happens Under the Mistletoe, so that's the title for it. And it is, I think, just interconnected novellas. It says it's the most wonderful time of the year when lovers' eyes shine brighter as magic and mischief fills the air. So it is about 3 novellas. There is The Heiress and the Hothead, which is written by Sabrina Jeffries, and it's about 2 strangers who come from very different worlds and they have a burning passion. It also has a novella from Karen Hawkins, which is set in the snowy Scottish countryside, and it's basically about 12 Kisses to Midnight. So sounds like, you know, that song with 12 items with that Christmas theme. And then we also have By Any Other Name by Candace Camp, and it's in Edinburgh, so this is also Scotland, and it's about a gentleman who is pursuing a lady in disguise, and he's trying to find out her true identity. And then the last novella in this one is Sweetest Regret, which is about the festive spirit of the season, and its heroine is under the mistletoe and a rogue comes to kiss her, but he broke her heart 2 years ago. So I think this will be a really cute one to read around Christmas time. I ended up hauling a bunch of historical romances because it's a genre that I'm just starting to get more into. I read a bunch of them last year when I wasn't really active on the book internet spaces, so I wasn't really on bookstagram or booktube or anything like that yet, but I want to dive into this one in the holiday season. It sounds super cute. All right, so the next few books I have to talk about are some Lisa Kleypas books. I have read a few of these. So the first book that I have to mention is Devil in Winter. This is a part of the Wallflowers series. So each of the books is following a wallflower, so these girls that become friends, and they are at the fringes of society because they're basically perceived as being unmarriageable. And this one is about the shyest wallflower, Evie Jenner, and she is going to become the richest because her father owns a gambling hell. So basically he owns a casino, but they call it a gambling hell in the past. And she's trying to escape her relatives, and she's approached the Viscount St. Vincent with an offer of marriage, and his reputation is very dangerous and he can ruin any maiden, but he really needs her money, so they end up in a marriage of convenience. And she comes with a few conditions. She just wants it to be a marriage of convenience. She doesn't want them to actually fall in love with each other or anything like that, but fate had different plans for them. I have read this book and I really enjoyed it. I look forward to rereading the Wallflowers books time and time again, and this sounds like a great one for the winter time, which is the season we just passed, but definitely one that I absolutely adore and I'm glad to have it in my collection. The next book that I have to talk about is book number 2 in the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas, and it is It Happened One Autumn. So this is following an American heiress named Lillian Bowman. She has very independent American ways and it doesn't fit well with the society there, and she is disapproved by everyone there, and especially by Marcus Lord Westcliff, who is London's most eligible aristocrat, and he finds himself being swooped by with passion for her. And again, she's another wallflower who is trying to find a husband, and she is the second oldest because they're going in order of age. So I think it's really interesting to see how they come together. I know that this copy has been edited and a lot of Lisa Kleypas' books have been edited, so I'm curious to see how the original scenes are because I've only read the newer version of the book, but I'm happy to have this for my collection. The next Lisa Kleypas that I have to talk about is Only With Your Love. So it's about this newlywed bride named Celia Valorand, and she's the wife of a Creole aristocrat, and she basically prays for deliverance from the brigands who abduct her, and she believes her beloved husband has been killed, and she despairs for her own life. But she is this shy French woman who fears everything, and above all, this dashing privateer who she's falling in love with, and he pays a king's ransom to claim her. So it is about their relationship. He is known as a pirate of the open seas and is called the Griffin. He's rugged, he's powerful, and he desires Celia above all else, but he's an adventurer and he's a man trapped in a perilous deception, and he guards a shocking secret which would deny him a relationship with this enchantress who has won his heart. I'm interested to dive into this one. This is one of Lisa Kleypas' first books that she ever wrote, so I want to go back through her backlist. I've read almost every single book that she's written, but this is one of the first ones, so I hadn't had a chance to read this yet, but I'm excited to dive into it. All right, the next book that I have to talk about actually came with a few things. So it came with this like little print. It came with this other little print thing and what looks like a little butterfly sticker. I'll show that to you as well. This is what the sticker looks like, and I'll show you the other ones again briefly. This like orange tree and this succulent print, which I thought was really cool and really nice. And it is a book I got from Pango Books, and it is a Lisa Kleypas book. I think it's the last one that I have to talk about, and it is Love Come to Me by Lisa Kleypas. This is what it looks like. This book is out of print, so it's very difficult to find, and I found it for a decent price on Pango Books, so I picked it up, and it is one of hers that I haven't read yet, so I'm looking forward to diving into it. And it says it's bewildered, startled, she has felt his lips against hers, tasting hers in a way she had never dreamed of. His mouth was blazing and hungry. She was shaking, this time not from cold but from a heat that burgeoned deep inside her. And it's following a strong, handsome stranger named Keith Rain, who pulls in the young Lucinda Caldwell from a winter river, and he rescues her from an icy death. But soon he's plunging her into a torrent of passion that the New England beauty had never suspected could claim her. Heath was unlike any other man that Lucy had ever known. He was dashing, mocking, and a sensuous southerner who came came as a stranger to Lucy's Massachusetts town and stayed to conquer all the odds against him. So it is about their romance. She's from the north, from New England, and he is from the south. And I don't think I've ever read a Lisa Kleypas that isn't set in the UK. So it'll be interesting to read an American historical romance. I haven't read too many of those, so I'm excited to dive into this. All right, so this is actually the last Lisa Kleypas that I have to talk about, and it is Give Me Tonight. So this is also one that is super difficult to find. It is also out of print, and I found it for a decent price. I think it was on eBay or Thrift Books, one of those. And it says, his kisses left hot imprints on her skin as she moved even closer to him, wanting him. Addie was drawn as if by an all-powerful magnet to Ben Hunter from the moment she met him, and he is strong and handsome and different from the other ranch hands on her father's Texas spread. She is also very different from the meek, mild women around her, and they both have a secret that they guard from the world, and this secret that they can only reveal in a passionate moment when they have burned all the barriers away from them. So it is a romance between these two characters. It is set also in the United States, so in America in the past, and I'm intrigued to dive into this one because of that fact alone, and because it's one of her earliest books, and I know that this book is out of print. I actually realized that I have one more Lisa Kleypas, and it is from the Ravenel series. It is Cold Hearted Rake. This is the first book in the Ravenel series, and I have the copy with the step back, as you can see there. I know the lighting is not ideal, but that's what it looks like. And it's about Devon Ravenel, who has inherited this earldom. He wasn't in line for it. He wasn't anywhere near the top of it, but he has now a powerful new rank in society, and he has all these responsibilities. He has an estate that's full of debt, and he has the wardship of the Earl's late innocent sisters who are occupying the house, as well as his widow, Kathleen Lady Trenier. And she is very sharp-witted and is determined with a determination that matches Devon's own, and Lady Kathleen doesn't trust him. She thinks he's a scoundrel, but there is an attraction between the two of them, and they fall in love basically. So it is the story of their romance. I have read this one because I've read the entire Ravenel series, and whenever I do a reread, I will definitely be reading from this copy. But I love this series. This wasn't my absolute favorite in the series, but it came, like I said, in a lot with other historical romance books. So I'm excited to reread this again at some point and just do a whole Lisa Kleypas reread because I really enjoyed this series as a whole. The next one that I have is And Only to Deceive by Tasha Alexander. So it's basically this woman named Emily. She agrees that she's going to wed the Viscount Ashton, and she wants to just get away from her overbearing mother. He dies in a safari though shortly after her wedding, so she is not really feeling a lot of grief for him because she barely knew him, but she discovers journals of his life 2 years later, and she realizes that he's very different from the man that she thought, and he loved his new wife deeply apparently. He was a scholar and antiquity collector, and she wants to learn more about her late husband, but it leads her to quiet corners of the British Museum, and she's looking through stolen artifacts. So she's trying to deal with that, and also she's dealing with 2 offers from wealthy suitors who want to marry her, but they want to marry her for maybe some malicious reasons. So it sounds interesting. It sounds like it's historical romance, but it's also suspense. So this might better fit with the section on mystery and thriller, but I didn't know quite where to put it, so it ended up here. The next book that I have to talk about is The Secret Life of Anna Blanc. This is set in 1907 Los Angeles, and it's about this socialite named Anna Blanc who finds herself as a Sherlock Holmes type of person. She wants to solve crime, and this is giving me a little bit of Miss Scarlet and the Duke vibes because Miss Scarlet is trying to be a female detective at the beginning of the 20th century, just like her, and she's kind of escaped her chaperone, and she's using an alias to try to take a job as a police matron in the police department, and she's investigating all these murders, and she is taken in an investigation herself. So if the cops find out, she will get fired, and if her father finds out, she'll be disowned. And she also has a fiance who might cancel their wedding, so she has to choose if she wants to be a detective or she wants everything else in her life, and being a detective she might lose everything else, so she has to decide between her dream or leaving a killer on the loose. This is also one that I think would possibly fit better with the mystery thriller section, but I don't know, it just ended up here because it is set in this historical setting and she has this fiance as well. It is, like I said, giving me really strong Miss Scarlet and the Duke vibes, so I think it'll be one that I will really enjoy. The next book that I have to talk about is A Useful Woman, and it says it's a Rosalind Thorne mystery. All of these last 3 books probably should have gone in the mystery thriller section, but they're here now, and it's by Darcy Wilde. So it says that this daughter of a baronet and a minor heiress, Rosalind Thorne, was nearly ruined ruined after her family was abandoned by her father, and she's trying to survive in the world that she knew, but she has to manage the affairs of some of society's most influential women who come to rely on her wit and discretion. So when an aristocratic wastrel, Jasper, is found dead at the Almax, Rosalind is trying to use her skills and connections to figure out who the killer was and form a list of suspects. And she's torn between old love and a growing attraction to a compelling Bow Street runner. And if you don't know what a Bow Street runner is, it was basically what was the police force before the modern police force happened in the UK. And so she has to kind of juggle this mystery and the feelings of her hearts as well. So it sounds really interesting. It's set in Regency London, and I don't know, I'm curious to kind of dive into this subgenre of historical romance mystery thriller. I haven't read a lot of books like this, so hopefully I'll like it. The next books that I have to talk about are by Susan Johnson. The first one is Tempting. This is also historical romance, and it says her trust and love were shattered by public humiliation and private indifference from a man who cared nothing for her happiness or her pleasure. It is following this princess Christina, and she was trapped in a lonely and passionless marriage, and she had not resigned herself to her fate but wasn't tempted to change it until she met an American marquis, and temptation took on a new solid male form. So it is about this relationship between this marquis and Christina, and he knew that he couldn't resist her when he first saw her. So it sounds super interesting, and hopefully I'll be able to dive into this one soon. The next Susan Johnson book I have is Pure Silk. This is set in 1868 northern Japan, which I think is very interesting because it's a different setting, and it's when this woman's father has no choice but to fall to the Imperial Army. She has to escape before her enemies find her, and she disguises herself as a peasant boy. So she's trying to make it through the city's pleasure quarters, and she's going anywhere where something is sold that is, and just trying to get out. So she finds a man there who can protect her, and she wants to pay him in whatever currency he desires. So he is really interested in this beautiful daughter, and he also has to dodge assassins, spies, and the police, but he has second thoughts about her. Once she's in his bed though, he can't get her out of his mind. So it sounds like it'll be an interesting romance. I like that it's set in Japan, which is a very different setting. I feel like very few historical romances are actually set in Japan. The next book that I have to talk about is Sweet as the Devil by Susan Johnson. This is about James Baron Blackwood. He is a Scottish guard to the Prince of Domya, and he's charged with protecting the prince's newly discovered daughter. And he met the lady before at the home of one of his lovers, so he knows that she can pose a great distraction to him. And she is a sexually liberated artist, and she saw him and knew that she wanted him as her lover immediately. And the Scot is ignoring her, but she wants to seduce him at any cost, and she's willing to wager that she'll get what she wants. So it sounds super interesting. I love that he is kind of charged with protecting her in this one, so I think it'll be one that I really enjoy. All right, and the last Susan Johnson book that I have to talk about is Sexy as. This is about Baron Lennox, who is known for his luck with cards and women, but his good fortunes kind of run out when he tries to meet with his mistress and he finds himself in bed with the wrong woman. So there is a huge scandal that leaves him with only one option, which is to marry the lady. And this lady is sold, has no intention of marrying Lennox or anyone else. She has set herself up with a compromising situation to avoid this fate, and he's fine with this because he never envisioned himself as being married to only one woman and being only with one woman. And Lennox and Isolde end up finding that they have things in common, so I think that'll be interesting to see how this one plays out, and it sounds really, really cute. All right, so the next books that I have to talk about are all written by Georgette Heyer. The first one is The Black Moth, and this is about a man who's disguised as a highwayman, and he is a wrongfully disgraced Earl of Wickham, and he finds himself face to face with the wicked Duke of Andover, and this is the Black Moth, and he was trying to abduct a dark-haired beauty named Diana Bewley, and Jack has a noble impulse to save the day, but it ends up getting him into trouble, and it sends the villainous Duke scurrying. So Diana takes her gallant rescuer in, she nurses his wounds, and they soon find that they are growing an attraction between the two of them, but he can't stay because she is a lady and he is an outlaw, and they would make a scandalous pair. So it sounds like an interesting one to dive into, and it's got some action element into this, so hopefully it means that there will be some good plot to go along with the romance. The next Georgette Heyer I have to talk about is Cotillion. and this is about an unusual hero who is very rich, not bad looking, and mild-mannered, but he is a bit hapless, and he is not like his rakish cousin Jack. And it also has a heroine who is in a difficult situation. She's going to inherit a vast fortune, and she needs to marry one of her guardian's great nephews in order to secure it. So they have a sham betrothal, and as soon as the kitty arrives in London, the race for her hand actually begins. But between confirmed breaks and bumbling affections, she needs a daring scheme. This is all about trying to protect her inheritance from her guardian's great nephews. Alright, and then the last Georgette Heyer book that I have to talk about is Sylvester. And it's about Sylvester, who's a Duke of Salford. He is a bachelor. He has very strict requirements for a wife. She has to be well-born, intelligent, elegant, and attractive, and has to present herself well in society. But he is encouraged to consider this woman as his bride, but he finds out that she kind of resents him and she runs away. So they end up striking a friendship, and Phoebe soon discovers that the Duke isn't really the villain that she thought he was, and he has stumbled upon a person that he never dared hope for. So it sounds like a really cute romance, and I can't wait to dive into it. The next book that I have to talk about is Breathless by Anne Stewart. This is a woman that's been ruined beyond repair. She's been shunned by London society. Her name is Miranda, and she is very rebellious. She embraces the freedom that comes from having nothing left to lose. However, she's thrown into a very dangerous course and is under the power of a dangerous man named Lucien de Malheur, and he is known as the Scorpion. He wants to destroy her family, and he kidnapped her into marriage, and she thinks it's based on friendship, but it's rather based on vengeance. So she realizes the truth, and they have a very fiery connection, and they're like enemies to lovers in this one. So hopefully I'll really like this one, and I think it's part of a series called The House of Rohan, so I'm curious to see how it'll all play out. The next one that I have to talk about I actually found in a little free library, and it is Taken by the Prince by Christina Dodd. I didn't realize this was in the middle of the series until after I picked it up, but it does kind of have a step back. I don't know if you consider this a step back, but it is a very beautiful landscape in there, and it is about Lady Victoria, who's very strict and sure that England is the only civilized place in the world, and she knows the truth about dashing, dissolute Sarah Lawrence. He's a renegade prince plotting to seize control of his country, and they have a chance meeting that brings them face to face, and she can no longer ignore his past, and they encounter each other at a ball and have a forbidden kiss, and he wants to make sure that she is silent, that she won't reveal his identity. So he kidnaps her and carries her away to his castle deep in the woods, and they soon find that they have a lot in common, and they fall in love. So it sounds like a really fun historical romance, and I can't wait to dive into the series. Alright, the next book that I have to talk about is You May Kiss the Bride by Lisa Byrne, and this is part of the Penhallow Dynasty series. So it's her debut novel actually, and it introduces us to the series where men are destined to marry but they're hesitant to love. So it's about this wealthy and arrogant man named Gabriel Penhallow. He knows it's time to fulfill his destiny. He needs to have a bride, and he wants to find one that is biddable, produces an heir, and then live separate lives. So he basically just wants to have an heir and move on. And this worked for generations, and he doesn't expect that one kiss with Livia Stewart is going to change things, and society dictates he has to marry her. So he's like, she's fine, she'll do as good as any other girl. And Livia's transformed herself from an original mundane feminine of the first water, and makes Gabriel realize that she desperately wants her to provoke him into a kiss. And this is the one that wants to flee from what he now wants, but how can he keep her from flying away? So he wants like a very conventional relationship where they have children and then they lead separate lives, and she doesn't want anything to do with him. So I think it'll be an interesting one to dive into. Alright, so the next two books that I have to talk about are Harlequin historicals. This one is Their Marriage of Inconvenience by Sophia James. This is where opposites attract, and they're opposites in everything except for the fact that they need to marry. Adelia Worthington is marrying a railway magnate who will secure her family's home, and in exchange she'll give him a place in society. So their marriage is the last thing that either of them wants. It's clear that he's a self-made man and she is a pampered heiress, but it's very inconvenient for them when they realize that they start to have feelings for each other. So I'm curious to see how this one will play out. I haven't read a Harlequin historical yet, but definitely would like to try them out and see how I feel about it. The other Harlequin historical that I have to talk about is The Flapper's Fake Fiance by Laurie Robinson, and this is about an inconvenient attraction, and to her he is a convenient fiance. So Patsy Dreyer is an heiress by day, but there's nothing that stops her from dancing at speakeasies at night or trying to fulfill her dream of becoming a reporter, and she's investigating the murder of an escaped convict. And Lane Cox is a newspaper editor, and they pretend to be engaged, and their scoop is linked to Lane's tragic past, so it's about his past, and Patsy wants a happy ending for the two of them. So it is their romance. It is a little bit more mystery in this one. This is set, I think, in the Roaring 20s, so I love that setting. I don't think I've read many books that have actually been set in the Roaring 20s, so I'm excited to dive into one set in that time period. The next book that I have to talk about is The Proposal by Mary Balog. This is about Gwendolyn, who has seen her fair share of tragedy. She had a quiet life with friends and family and has no desire to marry again because she is a widow, but Lord Trentham scoops her up in his arms after a fall and she starts to feel sensations she hasn't felt. And he is a gentleman only in name. He is a war hero and his bravery earned him a title, but he is a merchant's son, so there's a class difference in this one. And he's happiest when he's working the land, but duty and title not demands he has a wife. He doesn't wish to court her, but he can't resist her and he wants her, but he isn't sure that she'll have him. He is an ex-military officer and he has carried her to safety, but he needs to learn how to win her heart. So it sounds like a very cute romance, and this one also has a step back, so this is what the front looks like, and then this is what the step back looks like. So it says he wants her, but will she have him? And that's super cute. And I can't wait to dive into this. I read a few of Mary Balog's books and I read specifically A Matter of Class by her and I really enjoyed it. The next book that I have to talk about is Daniel's True Desire by Grace Burrows. He is a man of the cloth, so he is a churchman and he's beginning to feel like it's a noose around him. His family is trying to get him to start over as a vicar in a sleepy Kentish town, and she has resigned herself to spinsterhood and she welcomes a new vicar to stay at her family's home while his is under renovation, and suddenly he has her rethinking her ideas about love and marriage, but his past may prove an obstacle too big for them to overcome. So it sounds like such a cute romance story, and I'm excited to read some Grace Burrows books and see how I feel about them. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is A Rogue by Any Other Name, and it's the first book in the Rule of Scandals series by Sarah MacLean. I've actually read this one because I've read a few of Sarah MacLean's books. I read the entire Wicked and the Wallflower series. I think that's called the Bare Knuckle Bastards. I recently read the third book in that, so I want to read more of her books. This first book I also read, but I haven't continued with the series yet. And it says, what a scoundrel wants, a scoundrel gets. So the Marquis of Bourne was cast out of society a decade ago with nothing but his title. He's now a partner in London's most exclusive gaming hell, and he will do anything he can to regain his inheritance, even if that means marrying Lady Penelope Marbury. She's had a broken engagement and years of disappointing courtships, and has little interest in a quiet, comfortable marriage and wants something more. So she now has a new husband who is this Marquis, and she gets to explore the world of pleasures. He is a prince of London's illicit underworld, but he vows that he's going to keep her untouched by this. And this one is a step back too, so you can kind of see what that looks like there. I'm excited to reread this one at some point because I really enjoyed it when I read it. The next book that I have to talk about is Glorious Angel by Joanna Lindsay. This is about a daughter who is born to a poor Alabama farmer. Angela has dreams of the impossible, of loving the dashing heir to Golden Oaks and having him love her in return. And she is in a boudoir in a bordello and her wish is coming true. And I think bordello is kind of like a brothel for that time period. And then this woman finally has this man that she's always wanted in her arms, but scandal and a shocking family secret threaten to destroy their relationship unless they can remain strong and admit to themselves that they have a once-in-a-lifetime relationship. So it sounds really interesting. This one is also set in the Americas, so I'm interested in seeing how this all plays out. And I think this one is set in the South, whereas the other one was set in the North. Curious to read how it goes. I haven't read that many American historicals, like I said, so excited to dive in and see how I feel about Joanna Lindsay. The next one that I have to talk about is Undone by Virginia Henley. This is about a woman who is an imposter. So she's celebrated in Irish society for her extraordinary beauty, but she's not who she seems to be. She's the supposed granddaughter of a viscount, but is actually a commoner woman with an uncommon appearance. And if her mother had anything to say about it, she was going to keep up the charade and take the London society by storm. She is like portraying herself as this duchess because she has men falling at her feet, and only one has captured her heart, John Campbell. So he is very rakishly handsome, and if she surrenders to him, she'll be playing with fire, and only John knows her deepest secret and knows how to unlock passion within her. So she is kind of portraying herself as this granddaughter of a viscount, and it's about this love story between her and this duke. So I'm curious to see how it'll play out, and I love that she has a secret identity in this one. The next book that I have to talk about is To Tempt a Saint by Kate Moore. This is about a man who's been knighted for saving the Prince Regent's life, but he will never truly be accepted by the nobility nobility, and he's trying to find his long lost brother and is trying to win the first heiress he can to get the funds he needs to start his search. And she has been denied her rightful inheritance by her uncle, so Cleo has been living on a farm with a meager stipend to support her and her brother, and only by marrying can she access her funds and provide her younger brother with the life he deserves. So they cross paths and they decide to have a marriage of convenience to benefit each other, but her uncle accuses them of fraud and they discover that love is actually a part of their bargain. So it sounds like a cute one. I can't wait to dive in. The next book that I have to talk about is Wicked Temptation by Zoe Archer. This is about a newly widowed woman who has found that her fortune was spent settling her husband's debts and there's nothing left for her now, and society has no place for a woman without means. She has nowhere to turn and doesn't know what to do until a handsome gentleman steps in, and he has a lot of secrets that are in his blood, and he has a nemesis who is part of this society's like senior agent, and society women usually aren't his cup of tea, but he has a sixth sense that there's something more to the heroine than meets the eye, so he wants to help her retrieve her lost fortune. But is his attraction to her worth the risk? So he has secrets and she has lost her fortune, so they come together for that. I don't know how this one will play out. I don't know if I'll love this one, but I'm excited to try a new author. The next book that I have to talk about is When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. This is the sixth book in the Bridgerton series, and it has been all the rage on Netflix. I've seen all 3 seasons of it, and I have actually read all the books, so I have read this, but when I saw it in my local little free library, I knew that I had to pick it up. It is Francesca's story, so she is the 6th Bridgerton. She's one of the daughters, and she has been widowed in this one. So it is about her coming to terms with her widowhood, and her love interest is Michael Sterling, and he is one of London's most infamous rakes, but he falls in love with Francesca the moment he meets her. However, she's engaged to marry his cousin. So there's that issue. And they fall in love after her husband ends up dying, but she feels a lot of guilt about it, and at first she doesn't see him as anything more than just a friend, and he is now the Earl and they're kind of coping with that, but she only thinks of him as his friend, so he's trying to move out of the friend zone to become her lover and her husband. I love this one. This is possibly my favorite one in the Bridgerton series, and I highly recommend it. I can't wait to reread this when I get the chance, and I am curious to see how they will adapt Francesca's story for the TV show. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is My American Duchess by Eloisa James, and this one also has a step back in there, so I'll show you that. Kind of what it looks like. It's a little hard to tell with the lighting, but it is about the arrogant Duke of Trent, and he plans to marry a very well-bred English woman. That is his goal, and the last woman he has ever considered marrying is an American heiress named Mary, who was infamously jilted 2 fiancés, but they have a very steamy encounter, and then he desires her more than any woman he has ever desired, and he wants her as his wife no matter what it takes. However, she is already betrothed to someone else, and she promised herself that she would make it all the way to the altar this time that she was proposed to. So her honor is clashing with her passion, and he realizes that the stakes are higher than anyone could have imagined. He wants to save her and win her heart, and it's clear that all is fair in love and war. So I'm really excited to dive into this. I have read one other Eloisa James book, and it's part of a new series that she's coming up with right now, and I have the second book in that series as an arc, so I am definitely going to be reading that hopefully this month, and I would love to read more of her backlist. I know that this is one of her most popular books, My American Duchess, so I'm excited to dive into it and see what it's all about. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is The Prince Who Loved Me by Karen Hawkins. This is about Prince Alexei Romanov, so it sounds like he's Russian. He enjoys a carefree life and flirting, and every lady who crosses his path he loves to do that with, but he's interfered with by the Grand Duchess Natasha when she decides it's time for her grandson to wed, and so he finds himself in Scotland and determined to foil her plans. But brainy, bookish, and respectable Bronwyn is the perfect answer. She isn't at all to the Duchess's taste. So living at the beck and call of her ambitious stepmother and social butterfly stepsisters, she has little time for a handsome flirt, no matter how intoxicating his kisses are, and no spoiled or arrogant prince is seriously going to be interested in a firm-minded female like her. So wouldn't it be a fun game to turn him down and prove that an ordinary woman can bring a prince to his knees? So this sounds a little bit like it's a Cinderella retelling, and it says it's part of the Oxenberg Princess series, so I'm curious to see how many other books are actually part of the series, but I'm really interested in this one because I really like Cinderella retellings and I can't wait to dive into it. Alright, and the next book that I have to talk about is A Midsummer Bride by Amanda Forrester. Just look at this cover, look at how stunning they absolutely look together, and it says that she is an outspoken American heiress. She is undeniably bad ton, and she laughs too much, she writes too much, she starts fires, and she pursues her interest in science, and her grandfather has matchmaking intentions for her, but she has no interest in being wooed for her wealth. And then we have Duncan McLaughlin, who is the Earl of Thornton, and he said that he would never marry to repair his family fortunes, but things are very desperate now, so he is kind of reconsidering that. And when he saves Harriet from a science experience about to go very wrong, all bets are off. I love that in this one she's like a scientist. I feel like you very rarely read about that, and especially less in historical romances. And I love that she's an American heiress. I kind of love that social class difference and that culture difference that comes from an American being paired up with a British man. So I love that, and I kind of get it happened when autumn vibes from this one, and I really love that book, so I can't wait to dive into it. The next book that I have to talk about is Dukes Prefer Blondes by Loretta Chase, and it says it's one of the finest romances of our time. So it's about this woman who receives bi-weekly marriage proposals from men who can't see anything beyond her looks, and she wants something more than just ornamental. She escapes to her favorite charity, and when she finds a child there that's in trouble, she turns to the barrister Oliver Radford, and he has unexpectedly found himself inheriting a dukedom, or in line to inherit one, and he's never been part of the upper crust of society, and he falls for this blonde beauty that realizes that she's not just beautiful, that she has a very intelligent brain as well, and she overwhelms all of his logic, and he just wants to be with her. They have an inconvenient marriage by ordinary standards, but they are far from ordinary. So she is an adored heiress and he is a difficult bachelor, and they're gonna fall in love with in this one, and I can't wait to read this one. I have been wanting to dive into Loretta Chase because she's a very well-beloved historical romance author, and then this is what the step back looks like. This one has a step back. It's super pretty. I love the green dress, and I love that the blonde with the green juxtaposition on this one. I can't wait to dive into it. All right, and the last book that I have for this haul is Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. Can't believe this is the last book, and it is set in 1879 England. Brilliant but destitute Annabelle, she is a female student at Oxford University, and her scholarship demands that she recruit men of influence to champion women's suffrage, and her target is Duke of Montgomery, commander of Britain's politics, but he wouldn't be the kingdom's greatest strategist if he couldn't turn the tables and confront Annabelle with an altogether different offer. So they're locked in a battle, they have a lot of attraction to each other, and she is trying to learn what it will take to topple a duke. I think that sounds super interesting. This is what the book looks like. Cover. This is a book of the month book, but I know that the other two books in the series are sold out from book of the month, which is wild to me, but I can't wait to read this. I know a lot of people have really loved her books, so I'm excited to try her out. And I love that she is seeking someone to help her with the suffragette movement. I think that's not something that's really talked about a lot in historicals, so I love seeing that that's part of the plot in this one. All right, so there we have it. Those are all of the books that I have hauled recently. Wow, it took me a really long time to go through all of these. I think I've been filming for like 2 hours or something like that, something crazy. It's about 50 books, but I will give you an actual count. So once I count them, I will let you know, and I will probably just insert it here as a text. So this is the actual count of books that I hauled recently. So these are books from January, February, and March. But if you've read any of these, if you have any of these on your TBR, I'd absolutely love to know. And if you've made it to this point in the video, or if you've just skipped around and made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I know this has been a super long one, so you're a real trooper. I appreciate each and every one of you that watches my videos, and I just want to say, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening for you, wherever you are in the world, I hope that you are doing well, and hopefully I will see you for the next video. If you like this, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. Bye!